That's not much. They have not been prepared.
Is the time table?
What? It wasn't bad when I was working. I've been in grants for a couple of years.
Oh, I'm gonna get like 30 right off the bat. I mean, I told them, get two, let's take a three and get a midpoint, and then you can. It's a lot of stuff, you know, it's a lot of. For the owners, maybe go and just. I'm doing that.
They've been using, but we don't really use it for everything. So we are getting it supported. We haven't gotten it yet, because I don't know if you found like.
Yeah, we've got a system called MIS, you know, BISD,
Yeah, yeah.
and they came.
Right
in-
there.
I'm really pleased.
What's it called?
BISD. No, we're not live. B as in boy. Yeah, BISD.
Oh, like Brian.
Yeah, right, and we have those. And I'll put you out to
I mean, I think we've already made an offer. You know, we may already have a purchase or whatever.
it's kind of funny. They're like people who do concerts. You know, because you got that switching out like stuff, right?
Well, the big thing we're adding is screen. Because those are, I think, body cam stuff.
All right.
Yeah.
Might get started.
They have been, I don't know, I think.
Welcome. As a reminder, the meeting is being webcast and recorded. It will be archived as always. You may have heard the legislature's in session. And where you been if you haven't heard that. And many of the council initiatives have been filed and we're working on following what happens. We're still working on the last ones, making sure they get filed. Also, subjects that we have had before, bail and backlogs are getting some discussion across the street. So we're watching that, and of course, judicial pay is very important to the 3,196 judges in Texas and the district attorneys and all of the others who benefit from an increase in their base pay. So we talked some about the backlogs last time, and we're making some progress on that. We'll hear more about that in the meeting, but we're disposing of more cases than are filed. So that's good. Still got a ways to go. The statewide felony backlog, we think, is down 23% since a year ago, which is pretty amazing. But it's, as you probably know, there was a good article in the Dallas Morning News. I say good. I thought it was a more thorough article than they've written in the past, explaining some of the complexities of the backlog, particularly felony backlog. But prosecutors haven't filed cases during the pandemic, so we're stacking up. That contributes in part to the jail population. Then on the judicial side, just trouble with trying to get jurors in court. But anyway, the top 10 counties with the largest backlog have successfully reduced their backlog, including Harris, which has a very big one, but also Tarrant, Bear, Cameron, Oasis, and Hayes. And as we noted before, there's no backlog in Collin County, El Paso, Denton County, and those are big counties. Of course, there's lots of smaller counties that don't have a backlog. So I think the The concerns that have been expressed, in my view, in the legislature are generally sincere and warranted, and we need to make sure that we're doing our best to keep up. But some of it is not so much across the street, but some of the criticism has been pretty unfair, particularly in Dallas, but other places. So we're making progress, and we'll talk about that as well as the court statistics in the meeting. But we'll get Megan to roll.
Chief Justice Hyde,
Here.
Presiding Judge Keller. Here. Ms. Bash. Mr. Bryant.
Here.
Justice Coy. Ms. Clayton. Here. Senator Creighton. Mr. Gimbel. Judge Gravel. Judge Laird. Here. Representative Leach. Judge Maderi.
Here.
Justice Miskell. Here. Judge Nash.
Present.
Judge Person.
Present.
Ms. Rax. Judge Sawyer. Here. Representative Smith. Judge Delane.
Here.
Justice Wise. And Senator Zaffarini.
Present.
Quorum.
You've had a chance to see the minutes of the September 30 meeting. Any comments? If not, will be approved. Without objection. And we'll go to the reports and action items. Indigent Defense Commission. Jeff Burkhardt.
Morning, Chief and Presiding Judge Taylor, members. I have just a few quick updates. There are some written updates in the meeting materials, and I'm happy to answer any questions about those. Yesterday, we testified in House Appropriations on TIDC's legislative configuration request. We have 4 exceptional items, but I'm just going to focus on one today, which is an additional $70 million over the biennium, primarily aimed at building rural regional public defender offices. We've lost about 500 rural defense attorneys over the past 7 years, and building these public defender offices has been one of our biggest tools for combating that. A few other quick updates. Our next board meeting will be March 30th in this room, so we're happy to have anybody who wants to join us. We hired our first research director, Dr. Sarah Gamble, who just came to us from SMU, so we're excited to have her on board. And lastly, this year is the 60th anniversary of the decision of Gideon versus Wainwright, which really created public defense as we know it in America. As part of our celebration, thankfully, Representative Reggie Smith, helped us secure the auditorium at the Capitol. And on March 17th, which I know some people call St. Patrick's Day, we're going to call it Gideon Day Observe. We're going to have an event at the Capitol, and we'll have some panels and speakers, and it's going to be live streamed by the Texas Tribune as well. So we hope you can join us for that. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions for Jeff? Thanks for the report, Jeff.
Thank you.
The fiscal year 22 statistical information. Angela, genius at OCA. Tell us where we are.
All right, Chief. Thank you. Good morning to everybody. So things are turning around, getting back to whatever is the new normal. Yeah. The filings increased or held relatively steady at all court levels except the Court of Criminal Appeals. And the greatest percentage increase in caseloads over the fiscal year were in the Courts of Appeals. There we go. So that Supreme Court, little up a little bit. District Court was level. Statutory county pretty much level. Justice and Municipal Court filings up. But the big increase in Courts of Appeals and the big decrease in the Court of Criminal Appeals. Now I'll go by case type. The case that everybody's talking about in the media and elsewhere. The number of new misdemeanor cases has continued to fall by half since the peak in 2007. After slightly declining during the pandemic, the number of new felony cases filed increased to the highest level ever. And I checked for September through December of this fiscal year. The felonies are exceeding FY19 levels, so continuing to climb. So they're a bit below 22. So I think that usually in the warmer months, filings go up even more. So I think that we will exceed FY 22 numbers. And misdemeanors are running a little bit lower than FY 20 before the pandemic. So continuing to decline.
Angela, we thought before that was due to fewer citations. Is that still what we're getting?
Yes, and the focus is definitely on the felony cases, and resources are directed to those more serious cases. The misdemeanors are not being filed as much. Filings in every felony case category increased except for robbery and DWI. Assaultive offenses continued to increase, especially aggravated assault and attempted murder. So what we're really seeing is continued increasing of the most serious and violent offenses on the felony side. Over the last 5 years, the only misdemeanor case types that have increased are assault. So again, the more serious of the misdemeanors. Theft, traffic, and other misdemeanors increased slightly in 2022, but everything else continued to fall. We did see a decrease in family violence for the first time in a while last year. New misdemeanor drug possession cases continue to decline at a significant rate. After reaching a peak in 2019, felony drug offenses dropped in 2020, but have increased in each of the last 2 years. So more drug cases out there. And new misdemeanor and felony DWI cases continue to decline. Fine only misdemeanor case filings increased for the first time since 2008. Very shocking. And through December, they are running similar to FY 21 and 22 filings. So they're probably leveling out at this point. Well, there's always a spike in March with spring break everywhere. On the civil side, new civil case filings declined in district and county courts, but increased in justice and municipal courts. Right now, for the current fiscal year, district and county is running slightly higher in civil case filings. Marginally. JP is increasing more than FY 21 and 22, but is lower than before the pandemic. So increasing, but not to where we were before that big peak in the justice courts. Change in filings in the civil case category varied by case category. About half the case categories saw an increase. Significant declines occurred in debt cases, which surprised me, and motor vehicle cases, which had been one of our growth drivers for the last 10 years. So they have declined. And those are two of the largest case categories, the motor vehicle accidents and debt cases. On the justice court side, the landlord-tenant cases increased 96%, basically doubled. But you have to remember that those cases changed during the pandemic because of the restrictions in filing. The substantial declines occurred in debt cases. Despite the decline in filings, debt cases grew as a share of the total caseload in the county courts and remained steady in the district courts. In the district and county, debt cases are running higher than FY 22, but lower than FY 20 before the pandemic. And in JP courts, they're running slightly lower than FY 22. You can see in the county courts of law, debt cases account for 50% of the total civil caseload. And in justice courts, they run about 43% right now. So a significant portion is devoted to debt cases. New landlord-tenant cases nearly doubled and returned to pre-pandemic levels, and they accounted for 46% of the justice court civil caseload. Filings right now are running equivalent to FY 18, just before the peak in 2019. So we're back to 18 levels, and it remains to be seen whether we're going to hit an all-time high again. But we're on track. After increasing by 18% in 2021, the number of new probate cases increased at a much slower rate than during the pandemic. And the number of applications filed for mental health commitments remained level. Probate and guardianship cases are continuing to remain level at this point through December, as are mental health cases. Family cases, surprising trends here. New family cases continue to drop to a level even lower than the pandemic level. The number of post-judgment suits also continues to decline, and new filings decreased in most case categories. The only increases were up in all other family law, protective orders not involving a divorce, and termination of parental rights. And I checked through December, and the filings are continuing to decline by 4%. New child protection cases fell to approximately half of the peak level in 2018, but termination of parental rights cases have increased by 8%. The child protection case declines are due to changes in procedure. We've got the Family First Act, where you're trying to get the child reunified with the family. You take so many more steps. So those cases are being kept out of the court system for now. So we've seen a significant reduction in those cases. And the new child support cases have also continued to decline since the peak in 2018. And 2 years ago at our annual council presiding judges meeting with the chief and Judge Keller and the presiding judges of the administrative judicial regions, the AG's office shared with us that they are more strategically filing cases. They will only file a case if they know they can find the person. So that's the reason for the continued decline in child support filings compared to the past. Divorce cases have continued to decline in FY22, and parent-child cases not involving a divorce remain steady. Applications for a protective order not involving a divorce, unfortunately, continue to increase to a new high. In juvenile cases, after 2 years of significant declines in filings due to the pandemic, new juvenile cases spiked in 2022, and felony offenses fell at a percentage of total caseload. So more misdemeanors we're going through. And right now we're running slightly above FY22, but lower than FY20 pre-pandemic. So we're going to fall somewhere in the middle. Filings increased in all case categories except DWI and auto theft. And the largest percentage of cases, again, we're seeing in the most serious offenses: violent, capital murder, homicides, aggravated assault. Those cases are going to take a lot more time to resolve. Class C cases involving juveniles or minors increased for the first time since 2017. Traffic violations accounted for half of those. We did see a big spike in truancy in FY22. Also in tobacco and e-cigarette cases and drug paraphernalia. Right now, filings are running slightly lower than FY22, but the truancy levels are the highest of the pandemic and post-pandemic periods. So we're seeing a lot of, during the pandemic, the children weren't going to school, and now the schools are filing cases against them. Now we go to the appellate courts. With the pandemic restrictions starting to recede in the middle of the fiscal year, the number of criminal filings increased by 56% in FY22. And easing restrictions also led to a 9% increase in civil filings. Right now, through January, filings in the courts of appeals are up 10% from the previous year, and almost all of those are due to criminal cases, which are up 30%. In the Court of Criminal Appeals, applications for writ of habeas corpus declined to the lowest level since at least 2001, when we've been capturing data. Petitions for discretionary review to the lowest level since 1989, and original proceedings to the lowest level since 1999. the overall number of cases declined by 19%, and that was because the criminal cases were not being filed and getting up to the appellate process. So we expect this year filings to increase as those criminal cases move through the system. The Supreme Court filings increased by 3% overall. Pretty much steady, except for the regular causes, which were accepted onto the docket, increased by 24%. Did anybody have any questions about the court level data? Now I'm gonna go over clearance rates. That's what everybody's talking about right now. So clearance rates by court level for FY22 look really good. Clearance rates range from 93% in the courts of appeal to 110% in the county courts of law. That 93% in the courts of appeals is due to the huge spike in criminal cases midway through the fiscal year. So great performance, clearing backlogs at certain case levels and almost at 100% in other case court levels. When we look at things like case type, felony, clearance rates were at 98%. That is the best I've ever seen it in the 25 years of experience. So really working hard. Misdemeanors, 114%. Juveniles were falling down a little bit, 87%. Fine only misdemeanors, civil, justice court civil, all above 100%, family at 100%, and municipal court civil at 89%. Oh, and so I also ran numbers through December. I don't have it for the highest appellate courts, but right now clearance rates are running 85% in the courts of appeals due to the spiking criminal cases, 96% in district. We've got 80 in the county courts of law, but I think that's a data error because of Dallas. 96% in the constitutional county courts, 92 in justice, and 100 municipal. So it's still continued good performance. And in terms of case categories, felony is 99%, juvenile 95, class C's 91, civil 91, justice court civil 95, family 103. Continued good performance.
And Angela, those are averages, so something that we've been looking at to show progress in the backlog is we really saw an uptick in production from the court starting in March of 22. So we've been looking from March of 22 through our latest data is through December of this year to actually show progress post-pandemic. And when you look at just that time frame, the clearance rates are even higher.
Yes. So exceeding 100%.
So I think for this following fiscal year, we'll see those clearance rates go up significantly, not significantly, but a couple of percentage points.
Yeah, definitely compared to FY22.
Yes.
So with the clearance rate and the filing rate, now they are. This is how it looks in terms of filings, dispositions, and cases pending at the end of the year. This is over the last 10 years. Pending increases, cases increased by 4% in the Supreme Court, so not much, and decreased by 19% in the Court of Criminal Appeals. Increased by 7% in the Courts of Appeals due to the spike in criminal cases. And increased marginally by 1%, basically nothing in the district courts. So the district courts are keeping up with their clearance rates, and the pending cases have leveled off at this point. And we do expect better performance this next fiscal year. Pending cases decreased by 8% in the statutory county court and by 0.5% in the constitutional county court. So they are holding steady. And finally, in the justice and municipal courts, pending cases declined by 3% in the justice courts and 7% in the municipal courts. So backlogs are going down. And that was all I had. If anybody has any questions. Take them.
Questions? That's a good report. And lots of favorable news in that.
Thank you.
Is the annual report published for 2022?
It is not yet. We hope next month.
Okay.
Or something.
Great. Next is case level data report. Jeffrey, Alexander, Casey.
Good morning. We're going to refer to the blue and white two-page handout that's in your meeting package. We're both super excited about this project for what it actually is to do for our agency, New Texas Works, and the state. We also cringe a little bit because of the amount of work that's ahead of us to accomplish this. But we're going to talk about the case level data project. I think most of the members here are familiar with the case level data project, but for some brief history, you're probably aware our agency receives probably hundreds of requests for data each and every year. Requests come from the legislature, they come from members of the public, researchers, the media, et cetera, et cetera. All the information that we have in our database is at the aggregate county level. So that means all the data we have is for Nueces County and for Dallas County. We don't have information on specific courts. We don't have information on specific cases that come from these courts. That's often the type of information that people are looking for, and oftentimes they'll have to go back to the individual county and get that information from the clerks. So when we provide this information, it's as useful as it's provided to us in that form. Case level data looks to transform that. It looks to change the reporting practices by clerks across the state. It looks to change all the information that we get in a dynamic way. We're looking to get a lot of detailed data about all of the cases that are in our courts. Currently, the system that we have is called FARD. It's our Court Activity Reporting Database. I don't know how exactly how old it is. 20 years old. It's not a user-friendly database. It's accessible to the public, anyone can run their own reports, but it's unstable. Whenever there's requests for new data fields in the system, it's a massive undertaking by our IT department, and it's a risky undertaking, and our system shouldn't be like that. I think right now our system, we advise people not to use Google Chrome browser to run reports. That's just sort of what we're working with. So with case level data looks to change all that. And then I'll let Alejandro talk about sort of what's guiding our data standards.
And I just want to add to Jeffrey that the Judicial Council, 4 years ago, recommended the collection of case level data. So this was actually a project initiated by the Judicial Council. And I think Jeffrey didn't mention it, but we did receive funding in the introduced version of the budget on both sides to fund collecting case level data. So now we're the fire's under us to really get going on this. Not that, and we've had a project team that's been working on it for about 2 years. So go ahead, Alejandro, sorry.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Jeffrey mentioned, we're very excited about this project. We know it's a big undertaking, but we really think it's going to help us provide better data and more detailed data in the long term. I don't know if it's maybe just a soft spot for CARD. It does, what it's supposed to so far, but there's a lot more that we need and that we could really use our data with. So our case level data project is we're building up or using the NODS, which is the National Open Data Standards of the National Center for State Courts, as our base and our guideline to develop this project. And it's a lot of what we have been working on for the project team as a whole for the past 2 years. This is a National Center for State Courts driven initiative, and it was created to encourage and enable state courts to map their data to national standards. And their goal is to be able to have comparable data sets across the state. Every state captures reports up like filings and dispositions, but if we could provide additional data, it would be very helpful for, like Jeffrey mentioned, the media and researchers. There's a lot of requests that come from different states as well. And this effort has produced a set of definitions and data elements that the courts can utilize to share their data in a consistent way. And so that is what we are using as our foundation to look at this. NODS developed the data standards, and different states are already using it as a guide to see how they can facilitate this data sharing initiative. So here at RCA, we have used the NODS data elements and the definitions provided by the center as our guide, but we have gone far more in depth and looked at it to see what makes sense for Texas. So anywhere from the ease of capture, we have our court consultant who is on our team, our project team, Angela Garcia is on our team, of course, she's our data expert here. And a lot of what we've been doing is reviewing each data element, and there's hundreds of them that have been put out there by the National Center by case types. And so we'll evaluate and see, like, is this already being captured in most of the case management systems across the state? As you'll know, we're a very large state, so there are several case management systems that are used. So that's another challenge that we're trying to figure out how this is all going to come together just within Texas. I forget what state, maybe Angela might remember, there's a state where they have everyone almost except for one jurisdiction on the same case management system. And I thought, that's wonderful. I wonder what that feels like. So many. So, a little bit more work ahead of us. So that's one of the things we're looking at. The ease of capture, is it already being collected? It's something that the courts are going to have to add to their case management systems too. Is it not being collected at all? Is it in a document form? So it's not a field in their system. It's just a form that's uploaded. That's a little more hard to extract as well. So there's a lot of different things we're looking at while we're reviewing these elements. And then we go back to should it be required? So should we require our courts to report these elements to us? Which ones are necessary or critical? And this is based on information that we need to continue reporting at a base level. So filings and dispositions, which is what we mostly report out right now. And based on historical information requests that we have received. So where is this interest at? What would help develop, policies? What types of requests come to us from the media and from researchers from other places? In addition, one of the next efforts that we're going to work on with the criminal data elements is which ones are already statutorily required and which ones do we think are critical to collect but will require some type of statutory or rule change. So several things to look at for all the different case types. If you see here in your one pager, that middle section, the data collection, current and proposed. It's a very brief example of what we currently collect. So just as an example, a robbery case. We can capture the filing month, the county that it's coming from, and the court level. If this is the only court in that county, then we can look at it at a court level. But predominantly it's for the county. So this is that district and county courts. If we were to go to the case level data, in the same example, we can capture a whole lot more information. And these are just two small pieces of what could be collected. So for case information, we would have the filing date as opposed to just an aggregate count of all the cases filed that month for robbery cases. We could look at it at the court level. We could look at the court case, the initiating instrument, the defense attorney was one assigned or not, the statute and filing offense codes. These are some of the information requests that come pretty often now, and especially since the public safety report system launched with all the new bail reform. So that would be very interesting to be able to follow into cases that are filed. Another brief example, the defendant information, we can capture the date, the name, the date of birth, race, incident status, zip code. We'll be able to have a lot more detail for these cases and follow them from filing to disposition. I'll actually jump over right now to this other single handout that looks colorful and overwhelming all at the same time. This is just an example of one sheet where the team has been working on, the project team has been working on to review those data elements. This is the example for the defendant information in criminal cases. And so you'll see here we have different columns of what we're reviewing and assessing. So the ease of data capture, we look at, is it captured in most case management systems? How difficult is it going to be to implement or for the courts to implement this? And then what would we call it on our end? So what is that OCA field name going to be? And do we want to require it? So is it critical? Are we going to leave it as optional? Or do we not need to capture this information at all? And then of course with that, like what are the field values that are going to be to the system? So to have the best and most uniform data, we want to limit it to, you know, certain responses so that we can have a more collective data set and more uniform data set. And then you'll see here just some other, you know, notes. Those salmon colored ones that you see are, we're also flagging the data elements that will require some type of statutory change or rule change, which we mentioned. So this is how we're flagging those and then putting together some proposals so that leadership can review and assess, do we want to capture those? Because they're likely going to require a change so that we can get all of the courts on board and reporting these elements. And this is just one sheet.
I wanted to mention too, that by statute, the Judicial Council has the authority to make rules to require what data should be reported to the Judicial Council. These are actually Judicial Council reports and not OCA reports. OCA is just the repository for this information. So there's work that the Judicial Council is likely going to have to do if these are not statutory changes that happen over the next year or two, via rule changes in what should be collected.
Yeah. And I think this may be where Casey can jump in with some of the technical stuff, and then we'll get back to the project update and where we're at.
Yeah, so from a technical standpoint, you know, Alejandro mentioned our unified centralized friends. I know the CIO in Utah, and I always joke with him, you have a Supreme Court, a Court of Appeals, and like 3 municipal courts and a couple of counties, and that's it. And so they do have one case management system. So when you think about all this data, if it's already in a system, you just gather it and you're done. In our case, we've got 453 different courts, clerks at the district and county level. That's 453 different case management systems. JPs, that number grows. Municipalities, that number grows even bigger. The good news is that at the district and county court level, there are only 2 clerks that have no system whatsoever. And in their 2 counties, there are more cows than there are people. So for them, a lateral filing cabinet for your cases may be the right cost-effective solution. But everybody else has something. And the other piece of good news is out of everybody else, there are 5 vendors that cover 98% of the market. And so those 5 vendors, we've already worked with them on electronic filing to develop integrations so that our e-filing system, when you file it, it goes out to whatever court it's going to, whatever their system is, it's hooked in and it pulls it. So from a technology standpoint, we'll be using that same kind of method to where whatever system is developed will have APIs so that the local courts can say, I've made a change in this particular case. And then that system will say, tell me everything you know, give me all the data elements on that case that evening, so that we have data that's not necessarily up to the instant real time, but I can tell you we can then tell you what things look like yesterday so that we can have case information that way.
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of data production, is the system integrating with ChatGPT or something like that in order to facilitate the labor of those that are documenting?
I don't think that we don't have a current system that does that today, but all it is just a straight standard national API that we use today called electronic case file standards that has those data elements that are transmitted. And it's just a standard.
So it's only data transmission.
Yeah.
Enough.
No analysis is being done in it. When we do a project update, one of the things I do expect that we'll be procuring is some kind of business intelligence tool that's sitting on top of that data,
Exactly.
so that Angela and her people can,
So it will be easier to manage and mine it,
right,
because there's just a lot of data sitting there. There's nothing.
absolutely,
And so the
absolutely.
purpose of data is you have usability of it.
exactly.
And so it's not just collection. I see collection, I see a lot of collection here, but I don't see any.
Yeah.
Any hand to use.
And the nice thing is that in the business intelligence, as you know, the business intelligence world is full of tools that are already there that we can pick and choose
Right,
from those
and
tools.
GPT is free right now, so that would be incredible for, even for the judges to make fast decisions on what is in there. You can tell it to behave as a judge, and it will think as a judge, and produce that data, and so the judge can handle it. So,
Casey, will you talk about the integration with e-filing and research
Sure, so
and
what some of the other states
how
have
if we
done,
had a business intelligence tool today, we could get probably half of this information already from about half the counties.
so, and right now, I think it was, the count that I had was like 70 some odd counties are integrated, so in the e-filing system we talked about, when you file, it transmits out to the local court. That gets you the, here I'm filing something, but that doesn't get you the, well, what happened in this case? On the back end, we also already have Research Texas, which is the statewide document access system. And we've got several counties, mainly the larger jurisdictions. I know Dallas, Collin, Denton. I think Travis is about to be, Bear is about to be, to where they're integrated in so that when someone wants to look at case 1, 2, 3, 4 in Dallas County, they can go to research, and that in real time calls out to the Dallas County District Clerk's case management system and says, these are the documents that you have, right? These are the case events that you have. These are the parties, right? And it will show them on the screen. And so our friends in Illinois, they're also decentralized, so they operate a lot like us. They also have the same e-filing system, the same document access system. And what they're doing is they're expanding their document access. So I mentioned earlier, those APIs, our document access system operates to where the local system just calls it and says, I've had a change to case 1, 2, 3, 4. And the document access system says, thanks, I got it. Because you can imagine all across the state, that's going to happen thousands and hundreds of thousands of times a day. Then at nighttime, presumably when the judges and the litigants are sleeping, the computers are up working and it's calling out to each of the individual counties. Okay, Dallas, you told me that there was a change in this case. Give me all the data on that case because there's been a change to it. And then it will download all the data elements that the team has identified, and now they have that updated case. And so in Illinois, they're expanding that, tell me about this case to include all the data elements and nods so that they have that data. So if we were to choose to go to that general route, then you all of a sudden, we expand that API, get the vendors to put that data in that API, and then now we have case level data fairly quickly. The other piece that they have in e-filing that we're leveraging is a software called Socrata, which is a business intelligence tool. And it's already sitting on top of our e-filing data so that we can see things like types of cases filed, where they're filed, how fast are the clerks processing them, those kinds of things. And so we could leverage that same tool to sit on top of the case level data. And the Socrata folks have been great about, I need a report that looks like this, or tell me how I can mine it
So
like that.
basically the clerks would not have to report any longer because we could just
Right.
pull it from
Right.
e-filing and research.
Right.
And so that is an option that
It's a
we are
huge carrot.
exploring.
Right,
I know this is all very detailed and
but it seems easy, it seems like it is, well,
so
because of the size.
The volume.
Because of 400
Why don't you have the
case.
background? Yeah.
But if you create a pilot that's API, AI, and BI based, I think you could create a good
Yeah.
good mock-up.
And so, to your point, Ms. Clayton, the other thing that I'm thinking of, and Megan and I have talked about this, is when we talk about rolling this out, this isn't going to be, hey, all courts in Texas on September 1st, we're switching on this system. That, in our state, that's a bad idea to switch something on statewide all at once. So.
Sample population, low pilot.
Yeah, what we would do is much like we did with e-filing, to where we recommended the court, let's roll this out in the top 10 most populous counties, then because they generally have resources. And then on a scheduled basis, start rolling it out to the other courts. Yes,
And I think you mentioned, but you'll be in communication with those vendors.
absolutely. We have.
Tyler seems to be the huge.
Yeah, so Tyler, who coincidentally runs our e-filing and document access system, they run about 43% of the systems at the district county level. They're at about 60% at the JP level and right at 50% at the municipal level. And so we know we're gathering the data, but we've already got a lot of data on which court is running what system, and everybody's falling into one of about 6 or 7 buckets. And so we would work directly with those vendors to say, here are the APIs, here are the expanded APIs, and what we need you all to commit to doing.
You using in-house security or cloud security?
We would be using whatever we're not going to be building it ourselves. So we would make sure that the vendor is using, is meeting TAC 202, which is in the government code. The DIR does as far as what cloud security goes. And I think as of now, there have to be TexRAMP certified.
Okay.
And so we'll be using
Yeah,
those.
that's very important. There's a lot of data there and very
Yep.
sensitive.
Agreed.
Thank you.
So the e-filing rolled out, and it took us about 2.5 years
Correct.
on the civil side, and I think about that long on the criminal side. So how does that compare to what we're talking about here?
I think this should be a little bit easier because when we did e-filing, that was all new. This API didn't exist before. And so we're having to construct it. This is, instead of saying, build me a house, I'm just now saying, I need you to remodel these 2 bathrooms. And so, yes, it's work and yes, it'll take time, but it's not as intense as build me a house.
So what's the timeline on that then?
It depends on, the procurement takes what, about 9 months to a year, depending on how it works. And then after that, by then, Alejandra's group would have a lot of the data elements finalized. And so I can imagine that is just working with the vendor. Okay, we need to get the API stood up and running. And so it would depend on them, and obviously time, quality, and money. It's the 3-legged stool. You can only pick 2. And so it's one of the things that, depending on how.
And then notice to the different case
Vendors.
management systems to make this change, and we suspect there might be integration costs, and that's something that we're looking at for the rest of the counties that aren't integrated with e-filing. So
That
those
aren't integrated with research as well.
so those are things that we don't have a specific timeline yet, but since it was funded in the budget, and there's also several bills out there that we'll get to in a little bit that are requiring caseable data, that could speed up
It's super priority, high level,
Yes.
number 1.
There's lots of discussion in the legislature right now about getting more granular with the data.
If you were private sector, they will kill you right now. You have to have a timeline.
Right. Fortunately, I work in the government.
We'll have a better timeline, hopefully at the next meeting for you, because there are steps that the judicial council is going to have to make.
Like, and Megan's talking about other things the judicial council has to do. I mean, this would, with those APIs, it would do things like, well, you need to be doing electronic filing. And so like right now, it's mandatory in the district and county courts, but it's not mandatory in JPs. We have a lot of JPs doing it, and we have a lot of JPs that are integrated in, but then there are a lot of JPs that aren't. And so, it's dealing with those kinds of things.
We won't start with the JP.
No.
We'll probably start with district and county, and that's most likely at the criminal.
It's huge.
And then you have to integrate the change management piece with it as
Yes.
well, so.
Mhm.
It's a big project. Thank you.
But at eventually we would be able to tell court by court what was going through the court, how fast it was going through the court. We get a complete picture.
Exactly. Down to the judge level. So you'd be able, because like right now, my understanding is we only have county level data.
Correct.
So you can just tell this county may have a problem, or there may be an issue that we need to look at, but you can only tell the county, and it may be that it's only 3 judges of the 150 judges that are causing an issue that need to be dealt with. Or it may be that demographics, you could do heat maps to show, for some reason, in this part of the state, child abuse and neglect cases have gone through the roof. What's going on with that? You know, those kinds of things that are much more difficult.
And I know that some getting data by court, which has been a big topic in the legislature as well. May give some judges pause, but I think it also, we should look at it on the flip side. And it's a better way to say, okay, maybe these courts need more resources, and to look at it and
Like work Monday.
under
through
that,
Friday,
under that lens, instead of as a gotcha.
Oh, absolutely.
But I like it because it increases transparency and accountability. And you can hold those judges accountable.
Yeah.
There are some courts that don't work Monday to Friday, excuse me, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And data like that will let us know, let the voters know.
But also it helps inform like court best management practices.
It does.
So when I got on the bench, I'm like, how many trials do I need to be setting in a month? What do other courts do? But I have no ability to know that information. I can look at a peer county, but I can only see the county level data, not per court. And so even to know like of the courts that are doing well, how are they doing it, right? Would be useful to find out this, how should you manage a court?
But it helps our courts of excellence program.
It is, it's routinely frustrating because accessing that information within your system can be a real challenge.
Mhm.
And getting that feedback and finding out what is really happening here.
Right now, even in your own court, it's
Yeah.
hard to find out what
It
am I
can
doing
be.
that's working and what's not, yeah.
You can think something's very intuitive to find, and it not necessarily is with the tools that we have, so.
Do we know how other states are doing?
It varies state by state. I think Illinois is probably, what would you say, a little bit ahead of us, but not terribly ahead of us.
Year and a half to 2 almost. Yeah.
But then we've got a lot of other unified states that, because they're unified and there's only one case management system, they can already do a lot of
Huge
stuff.
differences.
And I would even say that Illinois is ahead of us because they're implementing e-filing at the same time,
That's true.
whereas we
We've already done
implemented e-filing
Years
years ago. And so
We have a footprint.
we have they're starting with probation data first, and so we'll see if we can get out ahead of them before we with our case level data.
Right, but I would say generally speaking, from the decentralized, and I don't know, y'all may disagree with me, but as usual, Texas is ahead. We say who's gonna do this, and everybody else steps back while we're just standing here, and so we end up coming being in the lead.
It's kind of on the subject, but not on the list of item, but a lot of bail reports are being filed. Thousands, tens of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. Yep.
Will there be a way to analyze those at some point, or?
I would imagine we'd be able to bring that data into this data warehouse, lake, whatever you want to call it. And then we use that same BI tool and can do analysis on that.
We're actually contracting with somebody right now to develop a dashboard for the bail data that would go over the bail data that is now currently collected through card, but also for the bail forms. So we can try to see, compare between Harris and Dallas and Lubbock, if they're setting different bond amounts for different offenses or if they're the same. So just more information to provide to the judiciary and the legislature. So we're working on that.
Yeah, and that one's coming very soon.
So the Illinois system is 100% customized as well.
It's not 100%, it's off the shelf from the e-filing and document access vendor.
And that's what you're attempting to do here as well.
That's one of the options that we have, absolutely.
Other questions? Well, thanks. We're just barely a fifth of the way through the century and already we're starting to end it, so. Great. Y'all next is the legislative update.
Good morning. It should be a packet for everyone to follow along. My name is Louis Tomasetti, and I am the new Director of Government Relations for OCA. This morning, I just want to run you through the legislation that the Judicial Council has and some general bill statistics from this session. About 95 days left in the legislature this session. I have some updated numbers on slide 2 from even what was published last night. We are right now at 3,963 bills that have been filed. So slightly higher than what is up there. That is about 28% over last session. OCA does a number of fiscal notes, second only to the comptroller. So far, we've been tagged in 631, and we have drafted about 572. They are really broad, so we get anything that is court-related, liability, changes criminal penalties, anything with civil law, and even new water districts. I'm going to run through some of the Judicial Council's recommendations and what legislation has been filed relating to them. SJ 44 relating to bail. As you remember, the council has made recommendations since 2016 to modernize our state criminal system. Some of the recommendations were incorporated into SB 6 during the 82nd called session. In the Damon Allen Act, that was a state trooper that was unfortunately killed by someone who was out on bail. We've seen several bail bills filed this session, but this particular one, SJR 44, Senator Huffman's bill or resolution would allow the denial of bail in certain sexual violence and trafficking offenses if the magistrate determines by clear and convincing evidence that the conditions of release are insufficient to ensure the defendant's appearance or the safety of the community. And it's been actually referred to the Senate Criminal Justice Committee for a hearing on March 1st. After the leaking of the Dobbs opinion, the council recommended criminalizing the premature release of a draft court opinion. Senator Huffman has filed SB 372, and Representative Leach has filed House Bill 1741, which makes the premature release a Class A misdemeanor. And the Senate bill has already been referred to State Affairs for hearing. Another carryover from the previous two sessions is the council's youth Class C diversion. The work group draft would allow youth charged with a Class C fine-only offense to be handled similarly to how more serious charges are handled within the juvenile justice system. Right now, if a juvenile is charged with a Class A or B misdemeanor or felony, it is treated like a civil case, but that is not the case for Class C misdemeanors, more like criminal trespassing. Texas is only one of 2 states that handles their Class C misdemeanors in this manner. The draft would require diversion strategies to be used like teen court, alcohol awareness, tobacco awareness, drug programs, or work and educational training. The revised version generally limits the number of diversions to 2 and allows for prosecutors to object to those diversions. The Public Trust and Confidence Committee had several recommendations. One of those was clean slate. Senator Zapparini and Representative Leach both filed SB 499 and House Bill 1737 respectively. And OCA has been working with stakeholders, including the clerks, to work through the logistics of how DPS will identify people who qualify for record sealing, get those records to the clerk's office, review them, and in turn notify the Department of Public Safety to place an order of non-disclosure on there. The Senate bill has been referred to the Criminal Justice Committee. OCA has been working with Senator Zaffarini on the civics education. It is the committee's recommendation to allow or to increase public awareness and our educational system regarding civics, specifically focusing on the court system, the role of the judiciary as a co-equal branch of government, the selection of judicial office holders, and the processing of cases, as well as the federalist system. The Civil Justice Committee recommendations included to change family representation in child protection cases. The 86th legislature passed SB 560, which directed the Judicial Council to begin data collection on court appointment systems and child protection systems and child protection cases. Reporting found that there is significant variation across the state on how those are handled. County spent $66 million in fiscal year 21, and 230 counties had not accessed federal funds under Title IV to help pay for a court-appointed counsel for those parents. As a result of the data gathered, it showed that there is a clear need for uniformity, and the Judicial Council thought TIDC was well suited based on their indigent defense work to oversee such a program. A bill draft enabling language is back from Ledge Council, and TIDC and OCA are working with several legislators to determine who will carry the bill. The Civil and Criminal Justice Committee recommendations included juvenile mix reporting. The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was signed into law by the president in June of 2022. One of the changes necessitated clarifications of Texas law to enable clerks to report cases to the National Instant Criminal Background System, also known as NICS, for juveniles who meet the definition of a federal prohibited person. And that is for the purchase of a firearm or the denial of the purchase or possession of a firearm for someone who has a mental health or intellectual disability in certain circumstances. OCA has been working with several legislators, including Senator Huffman, who filed SB 728, and more recently Representative Leach filed House Bill 2780. The Senate bill has been referred to State Affairs. The Judicial Council's generally, as an entire body, recommended some updates to mental health, and there's 16 topic areas there. Senator Zaffarini's office has been working with us on a mental health omnibus bill, which contains those 16 recommendations. They include limiting inpatient competency restoration for nonviolent misdemeanors, as well as defendant credit for participating in outpatient competency restoration, electronic application of emergency detention warrants, as well as those that are filed by medical professionals. The council supported the recommendations of the Judicial Compensation Commission as well. And that included changing the base pay of the district court judge. Judicial Compensation Commission recommended an 11% increase in fiscal year 25, followed by a second 11% increase in fiscal year, 11% in 24 and a second increase in 25. Senate Bill 802 and House Bill 2779 filed by Representative Leach would raise the base pay to $172,494 over 2 years. However, Representative Leach bill delays the proposed higher compensation rate from legislative retirement. Case level data. Yes.
If I may, we're working on a bill based on our interaction with me in response to my questions at finance the other day. We're working on one-time and merit pay for judges, reports of excellence certification.
Okay.
May not get anywhere, but
Good.
it'll start the discussion.
It's filed yet, or you?
No, we're working on it. I needed your answer for public record first.
Yeah, yes.
As you know, every single council committee has recommended for the case level data. We've had a great amount of discussion there about it this morning. There was several bills filed the previous session as well as this session that would require the council to start collecting case level data. Those include House Bill 841 by Representative Ordaz Perez, who would, or the bill would require judicial council to collect case level data. House Bill 1182 filed by Representative Harless would require counties with populations greater than 1 million to collect case level data. And then House Bill 1841 would require the judicial council to collect case level data on eviction proceedings. Similarly, for case level data, but specific to a type of case level data, Senator West and Representative Bowers have filed bills to create sentencing databases. And that would include collecting demographic information, bail information, and sentencing information. It is similar to House Bill 3334 from last session that OCA put a $3.8 million fiscal note on to collect and warehouse the data specific to bail. Several bills of interest that are not necessarily judicial council priorities. We are following very closely. House Bill 2272 would substantially change qualifications for the selection of associate child protection judges. It would limit the appointment to the position to 2 terms. It modifies the eligibility of people who have practiced law for 10 years or greater. And it further requires the candidate not to have been employed by DFPS or represented a party in a child protection case in the previous 5 years.
And on that bill, the qualification to be an associate judge is actually higher than the new qualification to be a district judge. So it's 10 year in the bill, it's 10 years to be an associate judge, and currently the new constitutional amendment that passed last session raised the years of service as a lawyer to 8 years for a district judge.
House Bill 2384 requires judicial candidates to disclose discipline and provide appellate briefs or oral arguments if applicable. It would require judges to attend 30 hours of training within their first year and then 16 hours of training after that first year annually. It would require OCA to collect performance metrics and recommend improvements. And it also enables a mentoring program for judges as well as creates judicial specialties. And that was filed by Representative Leach. SB 1045 creates the 15th Court of Appeals, which would be a statewide court with appellate jurisdiction over any matters that arise or are related to a civil case brought by or against the state or a state agency, board, or commission, or against an officer of the state or a state agency, board, or commission. The court would have 5 justices and has a creation date of September 1, 2024. House Bill 1728 and House Bill 2117 have received a lot of attention by some of our judges, and they both focus on bail and bail practices. They require minimum bail amounts in certain cases. One of them actually creates a misdemeanor for the improper setting of bail as defined and limits judicial immunity for how they define improper bail. And last but not least, certainly SB 380 authored by Senator Zaffarini would require interpreters to be paid for a civil proceeding when a party files a statement of inability to pay. That has been referred to state affairs as well. And then the judicial budget, some of the highlights. Surprisingly, a number of our exceptional items were funded in both the introduced version of the Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1. They included funding for salary staff increases and funding for case level data, as we discussed in Operation Lone Star. The raises were statewide and will provide 5% in fiscal year 24 and then a subsequent 5% in fiscal year 25. This will be a $1.8 billion cost and it's the largest increase in 40 years. As we discussed earlier, we were especially pleased to see case level data included. And you know, the council will be happy with that as well. We received $6 million in funding to implement case level data, and we believe that that is because of the increased transparency and ability for legislators and the judiciary to make decisions based on the collection of that data. In conclusion, only a handful of bills have been filed at this point compared to previous sessions. OCA does track about a third of all bills. The bill filing deadline is March 10th, and so we expect the pace of legislation coming in and the number of fiscal notes to increase substantially here in the coming days. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Do you have a expectation there's going to be a court creation omnibus package coming through?
Yes, we have been working with both offices, both chambers on a court omnibus bill.
Okay.
There always is.
Sorry?
There always is. There may be individual bills filed, but they're typically rolled into the committee substitute for the omnibus bill. It's just so much easier. And it's a matter of the courts meeting the criteria. There are a lot of community leaders who want a new court, but they can't just say we want a new court. They have to justify it and meet the criteria.
We have two legislative leaders here this morning. Now's your chance.
Chief, if I may,
Yes.
I hope that this brought to mind that, excuse me, I hope during the interim, we can study the whole issue of associate judges, because that is highly discussed in the legislature. And I believe that that position has evolved beyond expectations. Many of the judges are acting really like judges and calling themselves judges, not associate judges. And there are many judges who are passing a huge workload to them. But in some cases, because of their qualifications. So I think that that's a very important issue for us to look at during the interim. And we can say, as legislation is discussed, that's going to be an issue we'll discuss. The legislature probably will discuss it too during the interim.
I could have missed it in the report, but the creation of the business court, the potential creation of a business court, did I miss it in here?
Yeah, it's not included because it
Okay.
hasn't been filed yet,
Okay.
unless it's filed.
Okay.
I don't think it was filed yesterday.
If it's not filed yet, it's going to be today. I plan to hear in the House Judiciary Committee, that bill and the statewide Court of Appeals bill on March 22nd. That'll be our third hearing, so in about a month. We'll hear those bills in front of our committee, along with the judicial qualifications bill and the judicial compensation bill. So if anyone has thoughts that you don't want to offer here, you can call me at any time. I'd be happy to meet with you.
Others?
Chief,
Yes.
I've got a question and I'll beg forgiveness if I'm just naive or don't, if I'm clueless, because I really am, but for this council, I mean, there'll be a decision to support this legislation or not as a body. But as members, you know, if, and in fact, I do like the bills that Senator that Rennie is filing, you know, what can we do? Or is there anything we should be doing as members of this to help support the great work that they're doing in the legislature, or should we just stand back and say, just as a body, we're endorsing it and that's all we should be doing?
Yeah, no, as individuals, you're welcome to do whatever you choose. Your membership in the council doesn't hamper that or impact on it. And sometimes actually, because you've been here, been involved in discussions on some of these issues, you might actually be in a better position to comment on than somebody who would not been. So you're welcome to do that. Historically, the council has worked through its legislative recommendations ahead of the session. which we've done this time. We typically have not gotten involved in legislation during while the session was pending. It's not that we can't, we'd have to decide if we wanted to. We do frequently, at least I do, go across and say the Judicial Council supports this based on our resolutions that we've adopted or our discussions, or that the Judicial Council not discussed it, or whatever the case may be. But we certainly are engaged in all of these policies as they affect the community. So anytime we thought we needed to weigh in, we certainly could consider that. But for yourself, anyone is welcome to go over and testify. I think there'll be, for example, some disagreement among judges about the business courts and the statewide court of appeals and then court, and others not so much. So I mean, there's no branch position on council. Where we've taken a position, of course, we do say, like guardianships, for example, but lots of others, bail for 2 or 3 sessions. We do say we're strong in favor of this. And some of these ideas have come up. So it occurs to me that we may want to talk about some of these. We don't have another meeting scheduled till June, but we're going to talk about centers of excellence here in a minute, and just to kind of get an update on that. But it's long been the council's position that the better trained, the better educated in the judiciary, not just in general, the better the judge is going to be. And we've recognized that in senators of excellence, people who have gone out and really tried to show excellence in their courts. But with bills like more education and training, continued education, so many hours, all the kind of details we might want to weigh in on that. We can see what we think as time passes. But it's consistent with everything I think we've ever thought is that judges should be better trained. We just always had a difficulty getting our hands around it. You said, well, 8 years, 10 years, how many to be on the ballot to be a judge, and that's there's some arbitrariness in that. There's some reflection of excellence in that, but maybe. I mean, I personally think the better educated judges are, the more respect the branch has, and the better quality of justice. But we can kind of think about that as we review the session.
And we welcome testimony.
Absolutely. Not only testimony, but conversations in our office. If you want to call us, any of you can easily get my cell phone number from Megan. We meet weekly, if not more than that. Chief Justice and Judge Miskell will be in front of our committee next week. I view this, and I know the senator does well, as a partnership between the branches where we can partner. And the people in this room are so central to that. The business courts issue and the statewide court of appeals is a great example of ideas that have been proposed by the legislators, circulated among legislators, discussed in this room. And I think if you poll the members in that building across the street, there's division on it. We don't know where it's going to go or what the right way to do this is. And so in our hearing, at least for my committee, your testimony, your input in front of our committee is valued tremendously. Whether you agree with the bill, disagree with it, if you have ideas, we welcome it. So
I agree.
anytime you want to testify, let us know, and we'll make it easy on your schedule. If you want to be in person, we can do that. We can also still do virtual testimony, and I'd be happy to make those accommodations for any of you as well.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Thank you. I've been doing this a long time, and I don't know, we've had better friends in the legislature than Chairman Leach and Senator Jack Lane, so I do recall several times when we didn't have.
And we're delighted to be members of this. Obviously, we're here.
Yeah.
Proud of it.
Next item is guardianship update.
Good morning, Chief Justice Peck, Judge Keller, council members. My name is Jeff Bernard. I work with the Judicial Branch Certification Commission and Guardianship of Youth Fraud and Exploitation Deterrence Program, and with some of our projects here at OCA. So I wanted to give you an update on all things guardianship of what we're doing. And some days I wake up and I think I'm right in the middle of all things guardianship in the state. But so at the JVCC, we regulate court reporters and court reporting students, guardians, process servers, and licensed court interpreters. For our certified guardians, they're expected to have education and experience and take an examination, and they have a minimum standard and a code of ethics that they have to follow. So we take that very seriously. We've all seen the Netflix movie. We don't want any of that stuff to happen at all. So that's the deterrence program, the deterrence part of that. What we do with our auditors goes hand in hand with certifying our guardians. So we have about 368 certified guardians in the state, and about 80 of those are provisional guardians. So they can actually go out, they're better known as private professional or program guardians, and they can fill in where we don't have a family member or friend to be a guardian throughout the state. Also at the JVCC, we register all the guardianships in the state of Texas. So as you can imagine, there's 40,000 guardianships. We're very busy with this task. The registration includes online training, which all of us can take here in this room. Anybody can take it, it's free of charge. It's an online training, it takes about an hour and a half for all guardians. And then there's a registration part of it, and criminal history, the most important part. We do the criminal history, we give it to the courts and clerks, and the judge can use that when they're appointing a guardian. So it's very important what we do with the certified guardians, ensuring that they don't have a criminal history and they're appointed properly. The most important part of our registration is the fact that once they're appointed guardian, the information is pushed out to DPS. So if contact is made with the ward under guardianship, they can, DPS knows that when they look them up in TLITs, and they can notify the guardian, and they can also notify the court. And I do know that we have been getting hits from DPS. Our IT section, we know that there's hits. I don't know how many actually contacted the ward or how many contacted the judge to follow up, but that is working, and we're very proud of that program. So something else we do is the Guardianship Abuse, Fraud, and Exploitation Deterrence Program here at OCA. Senate Bill 31 from Senator Defferty from a couple sessions ago. And we thank her for her support in this program. We have a team of 18 auditors that go out and audit all the guardianships in the state of Texas. And we have 254 counties. We have 10 counties with statutory probate courts, and we have all these other county courts and county courts of law that we're working at. So like Casey said, some of the counties we go have more cows than people, but they do have big estates. They may have very large estates in those small counties. So it's very important what we're doing in monitoring that. So we have a group, they're statewide, they're mobile. They go out and review all the guardianship files for the counties. And in your materials, I have a one-page handout that gives you information about what I'm talking about and some of our overall numbers. During this process overall, since 2016, we've looked at 236 counties and over 300 courts. So almost 68,000 cases we reviewed. So talk about case level data. We can go into our spreadsheets and pull that out for you. And we've actually given you on the right side menu some information that is very helpful that we cannot get out of card. That'll give you some idea of what some of the guardianships are comprised of here in Texas. What we do is we look at all the guardianships for compliance, for initial, just for compliance relating to reporting and other things that are required by the court, but also the financial aspect. And then we create a report for the judge with best practices and recommendations for every case that we look at. So the judge goes away with a roadmap on what to do. We've had some successes with our program, I think. The fact that we've been able to do all of this, we've established a new program and trained 18 auditors. The auditor training is a 3-month course. We basically have to turn them into mini auditors / guardianship experts / attorneys / court people. So it's a big endeavor what we do with our training. So we've had some successes, really good ones with Webb County. I know County Court of Law too. They were one of our worst counties when we first started. And Judge Villarreal helped work with us and our team. They went from 80 or 90% out of compliance all the way down to a perfect compliance score. And he's also a center of excellence. I know that as well. Lubbock County, the same thing. They were 70–80% out of compliance. We were able to bring them down to 10 or 15%. I do want to give a shout out to Judge Laird, one of our members here today. We reviewed her county. It was one of the best in the state. We did that several years ago. I think she was like 8% out of compliance, and she runs an excellent court. So we've also worked with APS and other counties for individuals. So they may request our auditors to come out. So we had a case recently when we met with Spurry County. It was highly contested guardianship cases. These get very heated. So one of our auditors was able to go out there. We were able to work with the statutory probate judges, get a visiting judge to come out. They used our audit report to actually help resolve this case out there. So that's one of the successes. We've also had 3 of our certified guardians had their licenses revoked, where we work with our investigators here at JVCC and also with our guardianship auditors to make that happen. So that's an overall update. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have or anything relating to our 1-page handout.
It's,
I think this is great. The findings are just, we have some horrific examples of the findings here on the bottom of the handout. And I'm glad that you included those. I think this is the perfect time to give a report to the legislature, so that they'll see the results of this kind of funding. You may remember that our funding was line item vetoed, then our legislation was vetoed, then we came back and succeeded on our second try. But it's important to show them the success. The report that you published is excellent, but perhaps we could update it and share it with the legislature
Yes, ma'am. We can do
so that they will know the results of this. I think this is wonderful. Wonderful, but we have to show not only the findings, but the results, the consequences of our findings. It also would be interesting if we could look at perhaps the top 10. You mentioned Webb County Court at Law and how it went from 90% non-compliance to 100% compliance. But I'm wondering about the others. Let's look at the top 10 perhaps and see where they are now. Years after, for example, Webb County Court at Law number 1 was 88% non-compliant. It was the second worst court in the state. Where is it today?
And they've come down a bit last I checked.
But not from 90 to 100. So let's, but it'd be interesting to look at the top 10 wherever they may be.
Yes, we can do that as well.
And see, and then give them another push if they need it. This is terrific work. Thank you.
well, the Texas work on guardianships has gotten national attention.
Mhm.
I remember when we first started on it, we were sort of shocked. This goes to the data, need for data, but we were shocked to know that 55,000 of pending guardianships in Texas. And I don't remember how many billions of dollars were involved and all that. I mean, it's just such big numbers that you just thought, my goodness, he's always sitting there and we hadn't paid that much attention to it. But then you find out the same thing happened all over the country. And it requires some work to get on top of it, but we haven't been that onerous and we really made some progress, but you're right. So, yeah.
No, I don't know. Thank you.
Well, and Chief, if I may, the good thing is that the senator who supported us most strongly was Senator Huffman, who is now chair of the Finance Committee. So she will be an excellent ally and in fact, a leader on our behalf in this issue. And that'll be great to have her there.
Okay, thanks for that report. And then the last is Senator's election.
Good morning. My name is Michael Smith. I'm a management analyst with the Research and Support Services Division, and today I am the program administrator for the Centers of Excellence program run out of the division. I was asked to give a brief update. I will keep this very brief. I can report that we are back up and running. Currently, we have 2 courts working their way through the process. They are justice of the peace courts. They would be the first justices of the peace to find their way through the program, and we hope to have them up for nomination in time for the next judicial council. One is Judge Mark Russo, JP3 out of Rockwall County. The other is Judge Woolley, J.R. Woolley, out of, he is out of Waller County. He is JP2. They are both currently doing it. We have had their initial review, had them set on the path, and sort of worked out the process for them. And I hear from Judge Russo just about once a week on something he's working on, something he's changed, something he'd like to tell me he's going through. And I can say that based upon my experience with previous courts, they both seem to be excellent candidates. They're both connected, they're both touched in, they are doing above and beyond the work that comes with just the job and the definition of what a justice of the peace is expected to do. Currently, we have started open enrollment for the rest of the state, and we have a pretty robust interest that's honestly very organic. Temple Municipal Court expressed interest at the end of last year and has had to undergo some changes in her municipality and has new jurisdiction coming her way. So she has engaged with me this week, and we're going to start her back in the process and start capturing some of the work that she's been doing. McLennan County Court at Law number 3 is a new judge appointed in 2021 and has just won re-election. And he came to us because he went looking for a website update, found himself on Judge Villarreal's website and went, "What is the Centers of Excellence?" And we picked up the phone and called. So I can report that we are up and running and taking new applicants and definitely growing the program. I'm sure the program will grow a little bit more as we start heading into the conference season and I start getting asked to present on it and we start engaging our courts a little bit more directly. We do expect some growth this year for certain and probably into 2024 pretty robustly, particularly if we're attaching a potential merit increase to it. I think that will drive interest.
That's the point.
But I can say, I mean, we have in this room at least 2 that have gone through the process and a third that was working her way through the process and then she became a appellate court judge. So I think that stands to reason that the program is working as intended to identify those courts that really are standing out, both as leaders in the judiciary and more importantly to me, leaders in their community and taking it really seriously, the work that they do locally. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
How many do you?
I'm sorry.
I mentioned last time that Judge Villarreal had a beautiful plaque that the Commissioner's Court installed outside his courtroom. And it's wonderful. And I think it serves as motivation as an example for other people. And I'd like to see something like it proposed to other courts of centers of excellence. Because it's wonderful for the court itself, wonderful recognition, but also motivation for others. And I don't know if you've seen something like that or have something like that.
Y'all sent me some certificates and I kind of put them right outside the courtroom door and the office's door. But I think my, commissioners are, well, and I was awarded it right before COVID. So, there was a kind of a start to go forward locally, but then,
This
COVID.
is a big plaque and it has the name of the Commissioner's Court and all that.
Judge Derry, do you have something?
Yeah, we do in Nueces County. We have it built into our stone. I mean, they like carved out the stone and did a
That's
huge
perfect.
big bronze plaque
That's great.
down in the central area of everything. So, yeah, it's very nice.
Well, we have 3 examples that they could use and maybe develop a template from those.
We do send out a template for both a notification and a press release, and we do encourage our judges to self-advocate that once they have been recognized, they can approach their commissioners' courts with it. So judge, if you'd like to see something, we can,
Give you a letter.
They tend to cringe when they see me coming across this. Wants more money. But we can try.
I understand.
Michael, how many can you do? Because if senators ever any, if they file that merit increase, I mean, sadly, it should be done before that, right? Others did Center of Excellence just to become a Center of Excellence, right? But I have a feeling it's going to be a stampede on the way to you if that happens. I mean, I think it would be great, but I've tried to talk to my jurisdiction about doing it and as a regional presiding judge as well.
You know, I have 11 other counties underneath me. And I know right now, everybody is so focused on trying to get all our backlog done, and getting the jails done. I mean, you know, it's a lot of focus going on our work right now, but I would love for them to do it. And how many do you think you can handle?
I think that's a hard question because I don't think we've actually tested the limit of the program just yet. I mean, we were just getting the program off and running. We just got Judge Laird across the finish line, and then COVID ground everything to an absolute stop. But Jeffrey, I don't know.
I think we would need more staff for sure.
Yeah, we tossed that question
Interest
back
will
and
be,
forth, yeah.
I'm very.
You know, there's got to be some kind of way to go through it to see who really wants to do this, so you're not wasting your time working on courts that really don't care.
I mean,
Well,
so-
they do have a checklist that they'll send you that covers a lot of the big stuff. So that could be a good like weeding process. Like when you've got this all worked out, then call us and we'll do the more high touch things.
So that is typically how we work it. I mean, Judge Pandera, you helped us develop that checklist into something more realistic for what our courts were actually doing at the district level. The question of how many is right now, I think this year we're on track for maybe 10. Right now, we have 2 with a third engaged, and now Judge Person, I owe phone calls to several. And so if we think about it that way, that's probably what I can handle around the rest of the work that I'm asked to do here at OCA. I think the real question is right now is it's being found without the incentive, right? It's voluntary, and because it's voluntary, we're getting that real like interest in leadership.
Right.
I want to do this because it's good, not because I get the plaque for it. And so when we get that questionnaire and if we start attaching merit pay to it, then yes, I do believe we would probably need more staff. And I think then we would have something to do possibly with our prior centers of excellence to help us judge and evaluate what these new applicants are asking for and whether they're really serious about this program or whether we have someone that's. Well, 3 of you have seen it, 4 of you have seen it now. It's very simple to say yes to every question, right? And say that your court is perfect, and we have to go back and go.
It's not.
Then we
Think again.
ask you to present this and make sure that there's not something you think you could do better. And so we definitely don't want to, want that to come across the board where suddenly every court is sending us 100% perfect profiles, because then I have to question why they're not giving state tours about how to perfectly administer a court.
But yeah, it is tough. I mean, it's, everybody who runs a court really thinks that they're doing a good job. And I remember when we first got our scores back, I was like, wow, not so much, and then we had to do it, but it was great. It was a huge learning thing, and I've said this last time on the judicial council, if anybody wants to reach out to my court, we were the first and second court in Nueces. I mean, I've got the notebook to do. I mean, all the stuff that we did, I mean, I don't want to give them the cheat sheet, but I've got like the holy grail in my office, it seems, so I'd be, the bottom line is I would love more center of excellence. So I mean, I think that would be great.
Well,
So reach out to me if you need anything, any help.
and we envision that as the back end of this, right? Is we talk about judicial education, we talk about continuing legal education and qualifications, but oftentimes judges learn from other judges. They see what other judges are doing, and that provides them some context and framework, and that seems to be working so far. So we're excited to bring our new JPs on. We're excited to have our first municipal court come through, and we're hoping to grow the program again this year.
And how many do you have total now that are deemed centers of excellence?
5 total right now. You and Judge Klein, Judge Laird, Judge Villarreal, 4. We're at 4, I do believe now. Trying, hopefully not forgetting somebody. After all the work they have to do. We'll be at 5 and 6 with Judge Woolley and Judge Russo. We think they're on track to be here in June. We'll be visiting Judge Russo's court in March.
So I believe I was told at some point, and I may have misunderstood, but that you can't be doing the process while you're campaigning. Because I think I had checked about like following up after COVID, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll talk to you more after you're done campaigning, but I was running in 2022 and 24. So that would have been like a 6-year break from, eligibility for this program.
So we didn't, I think I may have miscommunicated or didn't clearly communicate that. I think the reason we stay away from campaigns just simply because we don't want sometimes you do come back with a bad score, or a lower score, correct me. And we don't want that to be used against you in an open access request, because if we were to be asked for it, we would have to provide it. And another thing is we don't want to be seen as promoting a candidate from OCA necessarily. So we just made the decision to not necessarily engage around election cycles. And then from there, I was honestly planning on engaging you again after the results of the election.
But then I still wouldn't have been eligible because I would have run for the district court in 24. So if you run off cycle, you are not eligible for 6 years.
I think that's something we could probably look at and put parameters around it, saying like, you couldn't say that you were a candidate for judicial, for centers of excellence. Because I think that's something easy that you could say during the campaign. And that's something we need to look at.
I think we do need to look at it. I think it's like I said, that's probably on me and my miscommunication. We tend to soft pedal it of the elections next month. We don't want this to be the determinant.
And my point wasn't to say like what happened to me. My point was to say, if you're going to expand the program more broadly, you probably need like a policy about that. That's generally applicable and clear.
Good point.
Yes.
Yes.
You said you were gonna talk to the education centers about getting a word out too, because I'm just guessing there's still a lot of course, they don't know about it, let alone the merit
We
increase.
see a lot of engagement when one of us has to go present at the.
So you have presented some?
Yes,
Okay.
we did definitely work with the judiciary at the JP's conferences last year. That was our first sort of soft launch to test it first and graduate. So we have TDC starting up again this year. We'll have other judicial education conferences. I've been asked to talk about it in tables, so we'll be on the road again soon.
I think that your talk with the JP judges, like when we did get our award, we did get it put in local, our local little papers and everything around. I would have thought our JPs would have seen that, because they're elected officials. But when you spoke at that conference, I got contacted by 2 of my JPs, like, oh my gosh, what is this? And we saw your name. So, I mean, it definitely garnered some attention. And I think especially as you grow the program, when judges at those conferences see judges from their jurisdiction that they can, text or pick up the phone, that will get them excited, because then it doesn't seem like some unreachable thing. It's something that's real. And hey, we have one of these people in our county, and what can we do to get on that list? But they were really excited when they reached out to me. So I thought it was great engagement.
Anybody else? Thank you. That's all we have on the agenda. Any other business?
One point,
Yes.
Women's Judges Day will be April 24th in the legislature, so any women judges will be invited. We've already alerted DPS to have extra security and protection. We reserved the old Supreme Court room for robing, and we're working on a reception afterward. And the judge who's taking the lead on the date is Chief Rebecca Martinez from San Antonio, Chief of the 4th Court of Appeals. And of course, OCA is.
Until what time typically?
We don't know what time the session will convene, typically 10 or 11. But
We'll probably be sending out a formal invitation to all or at least save the date to all the judges and so that they can get it on their calendar. But I know that some of the different groups have already been communicating that as well.
And we'll ask all the attorneys and all the women in the legislature to co-author the rest of the week, like we did last time. Should be nice.
And Chief Justice Martinez even invited me, so.
And I hope you'll be there.
Anything else? If things do come up, or you hear in the press something about, particularly in the session, you're welcome to call. Again, I'll volunteer Megan. You're welcome to call me, but it might get lost in the file. But certainly, and if anything comes up that we think we ought to talk to the council about, we might do that as well. So it's a very dynamic time. Stuff's happening over there every minute. So the next meeting is June 30th. Here at 10 a.m. And there being no further business, we will stand adjourned. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice seeing you.
Yeah.
May,